Good morning. Morning. Welcome to Thursday at TDWI. I'm Dave Stodder. I'm Director of Research for Business Intelligence. I'm pitching in for Paul Kautza, who is headed off to the wedding of his daughter. So congratulations to the Kautza family, and I'm sure it's going to be a fabulous weekend for Paul. So what I want to do this morning is just get us kicked off and introduce our next speaker, or our keynote speaker this morning. Hope you all have hung in there well during the week, and it's been a productive week for you, studying data warehousing, modeling, performance management, predictive analytics, all the topics that we've covered this week. We're almost there. Back where I live in the Bay Area, we have the San Francisco Giants used to play at Candlestick Park, and they would reward everyone when they stuck around for extra innings, which anyone who's been to Candlestick Park and extra innings, well, as they said, the coldest winter they ever spent was the summer in San Francisco. It was definitely true out at that ballpark. They'd award everyone a craw to candlestick, which they could put on their hat to show their warrior instincts for rooting for their team. So you guys get the quad at TDWI for being here this week, the full week. Of course, we have one more day tomorrow, which will start at 8 o'clock in the morning. Breakfast will be served actually by the registration area before classes begin. So out by the registration where breakfast will be, and classes beginning at 8 a.m. So let me introduce our next speaker, who I've worked with on many occasions over the years. It's really a pleasure to introduce her. Very popular TDWI faculty member. We worked on a TDWI forum earlier this year, and in my previous incarnation, not incantation, as editor of Intelligent Enterprise and other magazines, she wrote a column for us that was also extremely popular on business intelligence topics. She is, as I mentioned, a TDWI faculty member and founder of BI Scorecard, which does in-depth tool evaluations and exclusive hands-on testing. So this morning we'll get into business intelligence in a big way and see where the technologies are going. She is the author of Successful Business Intelligence, Secrets to Making BI a Killer App, SAP Business Objects BI 4.0, the complete reference, and is a frequent contributor to Information Week. Prior to founding BI Scorecard, she was manager of Deloitte & Touche and a BI standards leader for a Fortune 500 company, and she has an MBA from Rice University. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Cindi Howson.
Good morning. I need you in 2 minutes, so don't eat anything. Good morning. How is everyone on day 4 of TDWI? Are you drowning in information? So it's a long week, right? So in this keynote, I want to go through a couple things, starting with how to foster innovation in your BI teams. What does it really take to be cool in BI? What are some of the innovations? Why is it important? And I'll run through about 8 to 10 innovations, and then I'll do a deep dive on just 2 of them. But we have a bit of a problem. So I'm not cool. If they wanted a cool speaker, they really needed somebody like Jill Deshay. I'm risk averse. Here I am in my black suit. I was just moaning with Rich about the loss of my BlackBerry. I only just upgraded to an iPhone. And the music you were listening to, my kids had to pick that music. In fact, backstage, we had to zap Mumford & Sons. I didn't know there was the F word in that. So if you guys were here before 7:30, you might have caught that. So to help us all get in a cool frame of mind, I have to go back to the 70s. So I'm revealing my age here a bit. And the group that I thought was most cool, does anyone remember the Mod Squad? Please tell me I'm not the only one of that generation. Okay. So Julie is my definition of cool. So if you will allow me to think about Julie, and think about that 70s time. And I'm going to break free here. Hopefully I can get this jacket off. Okay. Now, this may not be the guy's definition of cool. Dave, I need your help here. Dave's a little worried. I actually saw Dave last week and had a chance to ask him, So I guess you don't think of a 70s A-line dress when you think of cool, do you?
You're cool.
Aren't you glad you didn't say somebody with disco pants?
Yeah.
So who's your definition of cool?
Well, being from San Francisco, I always think Joe Montana. Cool as the underside of the pillow, as they said.
Is that what he used to say?
That's what they used to say.
And what's funny is, so I'm not from San Francisco, I'm not a 49ers fan, and I was mixing up Joe Namath with Joe Montana.
Well, he's cool too.
But he's cool too. Here's the reality. I'm a Packers fan. So, for you, I hope you'll accept that another cool person is Aaron Rodgers.
Yes.
So you get to wear an Aaron Rodgers shirt to get a cool mind.
Okay.
I hope some of you will also agree Aaron Rodgers fits the definition of cool.
Very definitely.
Okay.
As a UC Berkeley graduate, this is my second favorite quarterback.
Okay, there you go.
All right. Am I doing the right thing here?
I think so. At least we're not making you strip, right?
Oh, is that coming?
No, that's not coming. All right, thank you, Dave. Let's hear it for Dave and Aaron. So hopefully you're all in a little more cool frame of mind, but what makes my definition of cool in BI? It's anything that really tackles our two biggest challenges. And our biggest challenges are we have limited BI adoption, and most people would say the BI tools are boring, ugly, unappealing interface. The other problem we have, we're talking a lot at this conference about big data. Our problem is not really about big data, it's the time to insight. As we have more data, it's finding those nuggets of information that's really important. So how big are these two problems? I'd like you to think of a number in your mind. If you imagine all employees in your company, how many employees do you have? And how many BI users do you currently have? Think about that percentage. Well, since we've been surveying people on their state of adoption, it's been flat, stubbornly flat. Even back to 2005, a TDWI study we did was in the same line. So this survey, 2012, we just closed that out. So you're the first group seeing some early results from this survey that we haven't yet published the report. So we're only at about 25% of employees in any organization have access to BI. And yet we've been talking about making BI mainstream for more than a decade. When we say if you have unlimited budget, strong executive level sponsorship, clean data, all the resources you need, what do people believe the real potential is? They say 56%. But I know, as a judge for the TDWI Best Practices Awards, and also the author of the book that Dave mentioned, some of the case study companies, they are closer to 100%. Now, this isn't really just about making it mainstream. It's about putting the power of information in the hands of everyone who makes decisions. Not just the managers, not just the power users, but even the frontline workers who are making the small decisions, the everyday decisions. So we have this problem of limited adoption. We also have this problem of the sense that you are drowning in data. So if you go back to 1990, only 1,000 terabytes of disk storage was sold worldwide. In this year alone, the analyst firm IDC, they estimate that we created 2.7 zettabytes of digital data. So it's the transaction system data that we've always had, but now it's also the tweets, it's the blogs, it's the media, the videos, the images, and whatnot. So that's 2.7 trillion gigabytes of data. So the problem, again, it's not just the data, it's finding that insight in all that data. So what are the innovations that I think are most cool that can help us solve these two problems? So in terms of limited adoption and appeal, I think this is where software as a service and cloud BI. So a lot of time is spent right now configuring the hardware, deploying the software, upgrading the software. With cloud BI, you have your infrastructure in the cloud. Sometimes you have your data also in the cloud. So if you're using something like Salesforce to mine that data, why do you have to extract it and bring it on premise? And some of the newer tools or re-architected tools, they don't require that you load all your data from your on-premise data warehouse to the cloud. Increasingly, they're allowing a hybrid. So I think this allows us to extend the reach of BI while still doing more with less IT resources. The concept of search, giving a Google-like interface to BI. So making BI easy enough for anyone, even if you have no training. And then Office integration. For sure, Excel, it's been around for decades, but we've seen a couple vendors like SAS and a niche vendor, APOS Solutions, where they're leveraging email, Outlook, as the front end to BI. And then mobile. I think we would all agree that the release of the iPad has really helped reinvigorate the concept of having a dashboard on a mobile device. I often say that the tablet computer has really reinvigorated the interest in BI from a lot of managers and executives. And then the use of Flash or HTML5 to create these rich reportlets so that people can access and interact with information even in a disconnected way. Sometimes via a PowerPoint, sometimes via a PDF file. Collaboration. So I'm going to expand on collaboration a little more in a few minutes. And then the time to insight. So some of the innovations here, dashboards and visual discovery. So if these components, if these modules are not part of your BI tool portfolio today, I highly recommend that you make them part of your portfolio. But there's some confusion about what do we mean by visual data discovery. It's not just a simple bar chart. So I'll elaborate on that in a few minutes. And then in memory, so right now for IT, if you want fast performance, it means creating aggregate tables, maybe partitions, indexes. It's very resource intensive. For a user, if you're a business user, when you have a slow query, you either give up, you leave it for the power user to deal with, or you start to change the way you ask questions. You ask smaller questions to make sure you at least get an answer back before the query times out. Within memory, it's really speed of thought analysis without all that extra work from IT to create these summary tables. Predictive analytics. So I don't believe that predictive analytics will ever be mainstream. Instead, I think it's the consumption of those models that the experts create that we're seeing more convergence with BI so that everyone can see the results, maybe of something like a predictor, likelihood to churn, or likelihood to respond to a campaign. We're seeing these nuggets of information embedded in a dashboard. And then insight to action. So starting in a dashboard, seeing a negative trend and being able to immediately take action. If you're about to have an inventory stock out, maybe then you click on it and you issue an order to replace more raw materials. And then big data. So it's hard to feel cool or to get excited about these innovations when you're sitting inside a cubicle. How many of you are sitting inside a cubicle back at your offices? How many of you have a view like this from your office window? So I got my start in BI working for Dow Chemical in Switzerland at their corporate headquarters. I had a view to the mountains and the lakes. It was easy to feel inspired. But I recognize that not everyone can go to a mountain for inspiration. So where do you go for inspiration to take advantage of these innovations or to know which innovations will provide the most business value? You have to go to the business. So the first time that Dow sent me to a plant, they actually let me drive around the plant with a hard hat, safety glasses, stacks spewing flames. I thought they were crazy. But I certainly had a better appreciation for why analyzing material safety data sheets was really important. An example of an award winner, 1-800-CONTACTS. So they actually had a problem in their organization, high Salesforce turnover. The BI team actually went and sat in the call center, side by side with the call center operators to understand what most drove the business. And the very week that they implemented a new dashboard, a real-time dashboard, they saw an immediate lift in sales. And then Salesforce turnover declined. So sometimes you have to go to the business for inspiration and to know which innovations will have the most impact, because they won't ask for it. They don't know what's possible. Sometimes I also think it takes a degree of pain or frustration. So Steve Jobs, people, if you've read his book, his biography, people think about his early life, his sense of abandonment, because he was given up for adoption. And that sense of abandonment, he eventually went to India for some of his inspiration. So another famous person, Taylor Swift. Isn't it great that she breaks up with a lot of her boyfriends? We get some of the best music after her breakups. In fact, my daughter said, somewhat, I guess predicting it, she said, God, when she breaks up with Kennedy, that'll be some really great music. And a week later, they broke up. Or Mark Zuckerberg. Does anyone remember what was his inspiration to Facebook? He was rating dates, hot girls. He was frustrated by the hot girls rejecting him in college. So this was the incarnation of Facebook. So sometimes the degree of pain is a good thing. And one of the things that I found in looking at why some companies are more wildly successful in BI, a phenomenon that I came to call the Loft Effect played out. So the Loft Effect, sometimes it's a little bit of luck, might be change in leadership. It's opportunity that you are seeing a new market, or it's frustration, the sense that people are tired of flying blind, that they're overwhelmed by the data, or threat. So I think for sure in this economy, there's constant threat. You just have to look at a few of the companies that really haven't even survived the downturn. So some examples of the Loft Effect in Medicare, or in the medical industry, Medicare payouts are declining. It's about 65 cents to every dollar. So hospitals have to do more with less. They have to treat more patients without insurance because the unemployment rate is higher. So some of the hospitals, like Seattle Children's Hospital or Cleveland Clinic, these are all industry award winners who are putting BI in the hands of more users, so not only just operating under those reduced margins, but also improving patient care. You look at a study of contrast, though. So Kodak, everyone takes pictures. How did they go under? You think about Borders, the bookseller. So they did not believe in the value of the internet. So who did they partner with for their storefront? The person who most wanted them out of business, Amazon. So you look at these other innovative companies, early adopters, Amazon to the internet, or even if you're in the public sector, higher ed, you look at what happened this past fall in Chicago or in Wisconsin with the teachers' unions. Well, Columbus, Ohio had a similar situation a few years ago. In high school, their graduation rates were only 50%. And now they've improved it by 30%. So they're up to a 70% graduation rate by giving teachers and principals access to data to see when a student is more absent, when their grades are declining, so they can intervene faster. So sometimes this degree of pain or threat helps us embrace those innovations. But in IT, I think we have some innovation killers as well. So a lot of you use or have to use a ticket support system. When the business has a request, an idea, you enter a ticket. So I'm coming from New Jersey. Allow me to use the analogy of waiting in line for gas. So you enter your ticket with all your requirements. The requirements should be obvious, right? After a few weeks, in some places it's a few months, you might find out there are not enough resources, and that ticket request gets closed, not prioritized. Really, to embrace some of these innovations, you can't use this reactive ticket request process. Instead, what you have to embrace is the concept of agile development, where you're sitting side by side, IT and the business together. It's not a pass the requirements back and forth. Instead, you work side by side, you look at prototypes, you look at proof of concepts, and it's a constant dialogue. So a much tighter partnership in collaborating on those requirements. So some other ways to bring innovation into your BI teams. Does anyone play Halo? This Xbox game? A few? You're all busy with Call of Duty, right? And Assassin's Creed. Well, I don't let my son play Halo. And I was debating this with, with a software company. And the CEO actually said they set up Halo in their war room, their conference room, and the success rate in Halo was a predictor of sales. When they played Halo, sales were higher. So I don't know if it really caused it or if it was a creativity, a team building thing, an adrenaline rush. So try putting some of these games maybe in your war rooms, in your BI competency centers. Also, dedicate a BI evangelist. So this is somebody who bridges the world of both the business and IT, a trusted advisor in the business, but also somebody who understands the possibilities of technology. And this person is proactive. So again, for these innovations, you can't wait for people to ask for these things because they don't know what's possible. But with that BI evangelist, be careful, because there is some degree of jealousy. The people that are just working on boring reports, reactive requests, they might feel jealous that they don't get to work on the cool things too. Also, establish a lab for BI prototyping. So USAA uses this concept, and a few years ago they had a very reactive model, and now 90% of their requests are proactive. So they actually have a lab environment where they try out new technologies. But to embrace all of this, the business also has to give permission for IT to fail. Some of these technologies may not last. If you're a first mover advantage, there's more risk. And you don't know really what the ROI is going to be. So allow IT to fail. So I've made the case for what can you do to be innovative. Why does it matter though? Does it really lead to improved business performance? So another survey data point we look at is how impactful is BI in most organizations. So this too has been stubbornly flat. The good news is BI is not a failure. As some analysts would say, or some consultants, but only 33% of companies would say that their BI program had a significant impact on the business. And that might be in the form of increased revenues, improved profitability, better customer service. So it was subjective depending on where BI was deployed. Now, I do believe that good is the enemy of great, as Jim Collins would say. So I don't really accept that somewhat an impact or slight is good enough. I'd really like to see all of you in that last category of significant business impact. So if we say the baseline is 33% achieve significant impact, the other thing we asked people is, what is your company culture for innovation? And only 17% said they were very innovative. 45% said they were at least somewhat innovative, but not at all innovative. It's 38% there. And yesterday I taught a half-day class on Cool BI, and in that class, the majority said that, well, we look a lot, but we never act. Okay? So if we combine innovation and degree of performance impact, so this is a dense slide. In your little course schedule book, you have a link to where you can download this PDF. But look at the far left, those companies that said they were not innovative, significant impact, only 13%. So far below the industry average. Contrast that with the far right, companies that said they were very innovative, their BI impact, 59% said they had significant business impact. So you need innovation in your BI tool portfolios to be successful, to have that bigger impact. So with about 10 to 12 innovations, though, I know everyone has limited time, limited budget, limited resources. So how do you prioritize what to go after? I use this acronym, this framework, MVP. I think about the maturity of the innovation, the value it brings, and the positioning, which group of users it most corresponds to. So often we think about just if you're an information producer or an information consumer. But if you analyze your user segments further, think about how often the managers are using BI. How often even do you go beyond the corporate boundaries to bring in the customers, the suppliers, as Walmart, for example, has done? So with each of these innovations, think about where your biggest opportunities are, what most drives the business, and which innovation will help them see the true value of BI. So if you take the concept of maturity, this is on the x-axis, the BI reach, the positioning on the y, and then I use a bubble graph to indicate the value. So a darker green dot shows if there's a bigger value. So if you take the concept of a BI suite, web-based BI, something that was really new at the end of the 1990s, it's very mature. It's on the far right of this quadrant chart. It helps bring BI to the masses with a low IT support cost, so high up on the positioning. If we contrast that with something like BI Search, a technology that not all the BI platform vendors support, we don't have wide adoption, so the maturity is on the left. So maturity, though, I'm not saying don't take advantage of things that are not mature, just recognize that there's higher risk and more change, more disruption. So again, the business giving IT permission to exceed the budget, exceed the timelines. So I'd like to expand on two of these innovations, visual data discovery and collaboration. So with visual data discovery, it's more than just pretty pictures. We know that with more and more data, people want to analyze all that data because they have a fear of making the wrong decision, of not looking at every perspective. When there's too many choices, a university came up with research that it increases stress levels. Now, this isn't just a pity party for the decision makers that you're all overworked and stressed. It actually slows the decision making, and we have more memory loss. So the things that you look at, you're not retaining. If you put a picture instead of a dense page of numbers, then you use 20% less cognitive resources. So these visual data discovery tools, they use the power of pictures to speed the time to insight, to make BI fun. So actually, one user of one of these tools said, I don't feel like I'm working. I feel like I'm just playing with my data. It also allows the business users to be more agile. They're not having to just rely on IT to develop reports, to build out the data warehouse. They can mash data sources together without having to always go back and enter a request. Some of these tools also support collaboration. So this is a list of the visual data discovery tools. Gartner estimates that this market segment will grow at 3 times the pace of the overall BI market. Right now, a lot of these solutions are coming from specialty vendors, but look at the list from the BI platform vendors. Just in the first half of the year, we've had new releases from just about every major vendor. So that puts pressure on your teams to evaluate these solutions and to compare them with what you get from a pure play vendor. So the other thing that so where do we stand on maturity? So from the visual discovery pure plays, I think the maturity is good. It's on the right-hand side of this quadrant. This is a darker green bubble, so the value is high because it speeds that time to insight while still using less resources. The solutions from the BI platform vendors, they're all pretty much version 1 products, so they do not yet meet the same functionality that you get from the pure play vendors. So that is still a little bit on the left-hand side. So again, as I said earlier, I recommend that dashboards and visual data discovery should be part of every BI tool portfolio, but be prepared to mix and match from specialty vendors. Another nuance to visual data discovery, so how many of you actually are using or testing Hadoop today? Only a couple. Okay, so not too surprising. In the big data forum on Monday and Tuesday, there were more people. But Hadoop actually can bring a lower cost of ownership using just commodity hardware and the file system rather than a relational database. So the importance here is for new data sources, whether it's social data, tweets, or rich media content. So we've seen a lot of innovations in this space. For some of the traditional BI vendors, the way that they get the information out of Hadoop is using something like Hive that lets them use a SQL-like language. We also have a new solution that just came out from Cloudera last month, Impala, which allows for more real-time querying of the Hadoop file system. You also have yet another new breed of vendors like Datamere, Karmosphere, Platfora. So vendors that you may not have heard of, they're not coming from the traditional BI world. Instead, they're coming from the world of Hadoop. In fact, the Datamere CEO was one of the original engineers that developed Hadoop. The CEO from Karmosphere, she came from Omniture, analyzing log files for who's accessing what on websites. So you have a new breed of tools, again, a new set of innovations to evaluate. So this is an interesting use case of this visual discovery tool, Datamere, on top of tweets, who actually is happier with their different phones. So you see, and it's real data, it's analyzing data, November 8th tweets, positive and negative sentiments. So somewhat surprising to me is Nokia has the highest satisfaction index. The Samsung is in between, and the least happy was the iPhone. Maybe that was me tweeting about the loss of my BlackBerry, I don't know. So big data, still really emerging, very young technology, and those vendors are all startup vendors. So a little more risk in terms of taking advantage of it. So the other innovation that I want to talk about, and I think it's really important, but there are very few companies that have embraced this idea of collaboration in BI. And we're seeing the effects of things like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube on BI. It's really about making BI more collaborative, more user-driven. So if I identify an insight that's really, I think, going to improve my company's revenues, and I want to share that with somebody, at best, I might email them a picture of that report. At worst, I might go to IT and say, please, can you give this user access to this report? Well, imagine if it worked like Facebook, and I could just self-assemble my own groups. And then if I wanted to bring in other pictures, maybe a video clip demonstrating the product at a customer site. It also brings the concept of fun and easy to BI. We also have these new data sources, so analyzing tweet streams. Now, in my class yesterday, I had a lot of business users, not as many IT people, so I have to ask you this question. How many of you here are using Facebook? Okay, so TDWI is not a good representation of passionate Facebook users. How many of you are using Twitter? Don't you want to know what I had for breakfast every day? Why are you not using Twitter? How about LinkedIn? Okay, so more of you using LinkedIn. I will tell you, as a data professional, as a BI professional, every hand should have gone up when I mentioned Facebook and Twitter. Not because I want you looking up your old high school sweethearts or wasting time following movie stars, but really it's about understanding the effect of these technologies and why departments might want to start analyzing the data that's coming from it. So if I had a call to action for you, I'd like all of you to go back and sign up with a Twitter account. I'm not advocating that you spend all day on it, but at least understand what its importance is. Can also tell you, coming from New Jersey, Twitter was the only way that I learned where to find a hotel when we had no power, where I could charge my cell phone, and where we could get a hot shower. So if you take the idea of collaboration in BI, I'll use the analogy of Dr. House. He starts with a hypothesis. He brings in data, does test results to test that hypothesis. But then it's meeting with the team. Have we run all the tests? Have we looked at all the data that we should? And then usually there's an outcome when you apply your hypothesis, when you take action. Either the patient gets better, or in the business world, you'll have that lift in sales, that improvement in margins. So bringing BI into the collaboration world, it's not just about the software, it's also about the culture in your company. So how many of you have seen the movie or read the book Moneyball? Gosh, even less than those of you who use Twitter. Okay, so this would be another way to bring cool BI into your BI teams. Have a movie night with your BI team and watch Moneyball. I don't like baseball. I'm really a diehard football fan. This movie, this book, it's really about doing more with less. Billy Beane, the general manager of the Oakland A's, couldn't pay the same salaries that the Yankees and the Red Sox were paying. In fact, his budget, the salaries they were paying was 3 times higher than his budget. But he was facing an old culture of how do you predict who's going to be the next star baseball player. Turned out they were looking at the wrong data. And there was not a culture for finding new ways. People wanted their job protection. They didn't want to be told that their old way wasn't working. So really having an analytic culture in place before you bring the software in is even more important. If you think about some of the greatest disasters we've had in the USA, if collaboration were available, I would make the claim that we could have prevented some of these disasters. The Space Shuttle Challenger, there was a scientist who knew that the O-rings would not stand up to the cold temperatures the morning that the shuttle launched. He expressed an opinion to one other person who told him to keep quiet, otherwise they might lose funding. If that information were widely exposed, if there was that culture for collaboration, for letting everyone see the data, maybe a disaster would have been averted. Same thing with the BP oil spill. So one of the contractors saw that the gauges were indicating a problem with one of the wells. But again, that information was suppressed. So I think for some of the decisions that go on in business, it's whether or not you allow the data scientists to express their concerns, to voice what they think is important. So do you value the second guessers? Do you value alternative opinions? So this character from Moneyball, when he expressed a different way of analyzing the data, and they tried out his hypothesis, does anyone remember what they said when they were still losing? He said, our sample size isn't big enough. Oh my God, I would have changed tact well before that. I probably would have changed tact after they were still losing after 3 games. But sure enough, after that, they started winning all their games. And this character was modeled after a data scientist that maybe a lot of you have heard of in the last 2 weeks, Nate Silver. So he predicted the presidential outcome accurately. He predicted it state by state. And it's, again, using the data. So I think he's brought more credibility to this idea of collaboration. So 2 vendors that I'd like to introduce you to that have collaboration baked into their product. Panorama, a small boutique firm, started in Israel. So again, looking at the news of last night, so the Israeli defense is using collaboration. So if you look across the top, you can follow data analysts, see which data they're publishing. And in addition to that, they have algorithms that will recommend what other data sets maybe you should consider. Another niche vendor, Liza Commons, or LizaSoft. They have the concept of the commons where people can publish data sets. You can also rate them. You can annotate, so you have some annotations along the left-hand side. One of the other reasons why I like them, their latest release that just came out, they're BI tool agnostic. So you can have a widget from Actuate, for example, from MicroStrategy, from Oracle, embedded in here. So they allow collaboration on top of different BI tools. So we've seen a number of trends in this space where some vendors will at least allow some annotations, but the concept of following people and who really has the best insights and information is something that more the specialty vendors are pursuing. So where do we stand with this? This is not as mature as visual data discovery. So these are really more on the left-hand side. But again, I think the positioning, collaboration, making it more fun and easy, working like Facebook and Twitter, I think extends the reach of BI. So we went through about 12 different innovations. So this is a summary scorecard of where I would position the maturity for each of these innovations, with the darker green reflecting the value and the higher ranked ones reflecting the positioning. The bottom line is that I want you to foster innovation in your BI teams. Allow yourself to have some fun, be a little bit risk averse, partner with the business to take advantage of these innovations. So sometimes the IT teams, I think they get beaten down by being constrained to strict requirements. Maybe you don't have the budget. This is where we talk about rogue business users going off and doing their own things. Work with them, tap into that creativity, the freedom, the budget that they have, and work more to figure out what can most address those two problems of limited adoption and speeding that time to insight. So if I end with 2 calls to action, I'm going to ask, first off, that so 3 calls to action. All of you should really understand the value of Twitter and Facebook. So if you're not using that, use it today. If you're an IT person, I want you to go to that new place, get out of your cubicle, go walk with the business, sit with the business, walk in their shoes for a day. And if you're a business person who's responsible for the budget, give permission to the IT teams to take some risks. Recognize that these new things, who knows what will actually take root, and give them permission to fail. So with that, I wish you all good luck, and thank you for attending. Dave?